This is the Hard Thing Podcast. Today, we are overcoming average. Welcome back, heroes, to the Hard Thing Podcast. This is the podcast that helps you overcome average, step up above mediocrity, all by doing hard things. Our goal is to help you improve your lives in meaningful and noticeable ways by doing strategic hard things that will help you improve your life. Not just any hard thing, but the things that will move the needle. That's what we're here to do. We're going to give you the tips, tricks, tools, tactics, whatever you need to make your life better. Today is our Monday show, so you'll hear from me and a guest. But before we get into that, a couple show announcements. First one, definitely check out our website, thehardthingpodcast.com. Check out our email subscriber list and see what is new. As well, you can check out our our gear, our merchandise, see what we got going on there. Also, I would like to encourage you to share the podcast with someone you know. Today is kind of an interesting episode, but definitely think of someone who would benefit and be interested in the episode and share it with them. And hopefully we can help spread this message to help more people feel like they are above average rather than mediocre. Because being mediocre is the worst. Literally, I know I've suffered from that belief my entire life, and I want to help you have the sure knowledge that you are above average. Last thing, I want to invite you to help us raise $1,000 for Operation Underground Railroad. Go to gofundme.com/overcoming-average. And for anyone who donates $10 or more, I will ship to you a tie from one of my old business ventures. It's handmade Italian silk. It's a really nice looking tie, but it's only for people who donate $10 or more to our GoFundMe for raising $1,000 for Operation Underground Railroad. What they do is they go undercover to rescue kids from sex trafficking. They're a really great organization. We're trying to help them out, so help us help them. Now let's talk about today's guest. Today I talk with Rahti Gorfien. She is a life coach, but specifically she focuses on career coaching, and she focuses on helping creatives, entrepreneurs who have ADHD. And it's a very interesting talk. We start off talking about adoption, of all things, and parenthood, which I find very important because being a parent, in my opinion, is one of the most noble things you can do, because it's one of the most thankless jobs out there. We then transition into coaching and life coaching, and really what's stopping all of us from doing the things that we wanted. Anyways, I'll let her get into that. Here's my conversation with Rahti Gorfien. All right. Well, thank you for being on my show, Rahti. I am very excited to have this conversation and to get to know more about you and your experience.
All right. Me too. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So, again, let's ask the question I ask all my guests. Rahti, What is the hardest thing you've ever done?
The hardest thing I've ever done? Well, I think personally speaking, it would be becoming a mother. I am an adoptive parent, and going through the adoption process was very difficult. Very difficult. A lot of disappointments along the way. Professionally, the hardest. Well, my first full-length play, getting that from idea to a full stage production, that was hard.
Well,
yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to dig into a little bit of the adoption process.
Sure.
And I mean, this podcast is geared towards helping people who have problems in their lives and helping them solve those problems, or even maybe not necessarily problems, but they aspire to certain things. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to get your, maybe we're getting personal here, but what, forget about the adoption aspect, but what made you decide to try and become a mother?
Well, I think, for one thing, there certainly was social tracking involved. That's what, there was, I think, a biological drive there to some extent, although being a theater artist, I certainly had ambivalence about it. trying to parse this correctly. I like to say that I sacrificed my fertility to the theater, you know, although it was a little more complicated than that. By the time my husband and I were actually ready to parent, we'd been separated twice. And I like to say that my son is a genius because he knew exactly when to arrive. He let us work through all our crap first. And then he said, all right, these people are solid now. They're going to actually stay together. I think they'll come on in. That's my fantasy anyway. I was forced to get very clear about whether I wanted to become a mother or whether I wanted to parent when we were treatment. And it became clear given my age that it was going to be a very expensive lottery ticket. The percentages were so not in our favor. And I was aware of women coming into this clinic who had done IVF, which is an extremely expensive process, like 20 times, and when you think about the hormones involved that are getting pumped into your body, and I have a family history of cancer, and we really had to ask ourselves, do you want to have a biological child that is of your ancestry, physical ancestry? Do you want to parent? And they are two entirely different things. So it was hard to grieve that loss and understand that, my gene pool is nothing to write home about. There's a lot of crazy there. But what I really wanted was to have the human experience of helping someone evolve, watching someone grow and change, and giving them the fertile ground to become the person they were meant to be. That was the experience I wanted to have for a lot of reasons. And my husband too, and so, we actually started the adoption process concurrently with the fertility treatment, because the advice I got that I think was very good from another friend who had adopted a child was, at least there will be a baby. There will be a baby. Once you're clear that what you want to do is parent, and I think that's the first thing you should ask yourself, is that really what you want to do? Then starting adoption process took pressure off the fertility treatment to some extent, and vice versa. But then it was hard because I had what I would call 3 virtual miscarriages. We were with one birth mother for 7 months before she changed her name and her address and disconnected her phone, and we'd already been sending her money. And then there were 2 other young women who were not that clear about what they really wanted. And one of them, the father was supposedly out of the picture, but then got wind that she was pregnant and decided he wanted to, quote, do the right thing. So, after that first time, I had stopped. I put everything in my life on hold. I was a company manager of a theater. I had another part-time job. My life was full and very busy. And I had nothing going on because I wanted to be ready for this baby. And then this was after the 7 months. 7 months is pretty close to when the kid's going to be born. Mm-hmm. And then the rug's pulled out. And I had set myself up for an incredible free fall, an incredible depression. And I determined after that I was just going to live my life. If a baby came and when a baby came, I would receive that baby, and life was going to go on despite it. as that occurred. So when my son finally arrived, I was directing a play, I was acting in a play, I was still administratively involved with this theater company, I was back at work, I was doing a lot. And a friend of mine who I call a virtual doula, she was my virtual doula. Um, the day the call came, we were very close to firing the agency, which we had found out was less than reputable, and we did not know that. There's a resource I would recommend to anybody thinking of adopting called the Adoptive Parents Committee. It's a not-for-profit. And when we went there and told us what agency we were working with, everybody rolled their eyes and said, oh my God. They were basically what they call gray market, and they weren't being straight up with the birth mothers. There was a reason things were not going well, because we were about to fire them. All of a sudden we get a call, and it's my son. My husband was on the way to the post office, except that I forgot to sign the letter firing the agency. So he was on his way back in the car, and he got a call. This was, this was in 2002. So yeah, he had this, and he called me and said, "There's a baby." I said, "Well, don't mail the letter." And it was my son. But up until the moment I was talking about the virtual doula, well, she grabbed me during rehearsal and she took me to Kmart or someplace like that. And she just told me, okay, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. This is what you're going to need. Okay, buy that shit. And I just let her tell me what to get, and I bought it. And we did not know whether the adoption would fall through or not up until the moment we arrived. And my son was swaddled on the couch in the office on Restaurant Row, 46th Street in New York City, on a couch. It was the most surreal experience. We were not allowed to go pick him up at the hospital. I have to say, to the birth mother's credit, she really wanted to do this cleanly. She didn't want us to meet her. She was older. She had some biological children already. She didn't want a bond, I guess, so she had the child left, and then 4 hours later call from a phone booth, I think, saying the baby is at this hospital. Go get him. I mean, I'm sure she's been through a lot. However, the way she did it was so kind. And, so we went, and he was 4 days old, and that's how we became a family. But the roller coaster was... the great thing was, in a way, there was no escape. And that's always helpful when you're going through something really hard. It's not like we were going to suddenly pull the plug on it. We were going to go through whatever feelings came up and do whatever we had to do. That commitment, I think, is what's needed to do anything that's really hard. So that was that story.
Well, yeah. I can't imagine that has to be such an interesting experience, because I don't have any kids yet, but I'd imagine that, when you conceive a child, you have those 9 months of anticipation with this idea that there's going to be a baby, and you're learning and growing and getting all the resources. And that's so fascinating that you get the call, it's here, the baby's going to be here, and you go pick it up, and suddenly you're parents rather than this kind of transitional period. Before we kind of switch gears to another aspect I want to talk about, what advice, what pieces of advice would you give to other prospective parents, but also parents who are thinking of adoption?
Well, I would say, first of all, that your life will never be perfect. It's never going to be the right time. You have to do anything you really want, you have to be ready to do in the middle of everything else. So I would say stop waiting. And I would also say that if you want a biological child, you do not have that luxury. You really do have to confront the reality of your biology. How old are you? And if that's what's really important, whatever's going on in your life, you better get to it. I guess that would be it. I would say my advice is, deal with reality. And the most important thing, though, is learning to create in the middle of things, because I think that's where a lot of dreams go to die, is waiting for the perfect circumstance.
I'd imagine that is advice that you've given probably to other people who have asked you about the adoption process.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I'm guessing you've given that advice to your clients.
Oh,
You
yeah.
are a career coach, is that right?
That's right. I am a career coach who specializes in working with creatives and entrepreneurs with focus problems. We all have focus problems, but some people have focus problems due to ADHD, due to life circumstances like I just described. They're pulled in 50 directions. And so what I do is I help people follow through, figure out what they want, prioritize, and follow through so that they can experience success and make money doing what they love. And absolutely, that is advice that has come up. The other piece of advice, though, that often comes up is you can do everything, but you cannot do everything at once. No, really, it's more that something has to be first. Something has to be first. I had to make some adjustments when my son arrived. I had a friend who stepped in to finish directing the piece that I was directing. I had another friend who understudied me and was the actor in that play because I had to step out. I had a kid to take care of. Something has to be first. And that's where I find people have a difficult time is in decision making. People will not choose something.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I read somewhere that the word priority in its Latin roots, it doesn't mean list of important things. It means the singular important thing, the first thing, the only thing that should take up your time, your focus, and attention right now. And I find that very interesting that you say people need to realize that some things come first. I find that very fascinating. So
that's right. Not everything can be first. Mm-hmm. And it's real hard for some folks. Sometimes what comes first is crystal clear, right? I mean, certainly now we happen to be recording this during the pandemic. And what comes first is health. What comes first is life. Not doing, staying home, doing what we need to do. Would not be the time. Well, there are a lot of things it would not be the time to do, right? But for instance, if you had a big wedding planned, it's the time to postpone that. You need to just stay home and make sure you have what you need in the house. That's what to do first. Sometimes, well, at least to me, it's obvious what needs to happen first. Other times, it's less obvious because really it's about what you dare to want. The world may go on whether or not you write that book. Whether you write that book or that play or whatever other 1,000 projects you have, create that voiceover tape or that new video game that you want to develop. I work with a lot of app developers and filmmakers, and they may have a bunch of projects. They must start with something first. And I give the image of a runway where you have planes on the tarmac, right? You got all these planes. I did not make this image up. I did actually get it from a dear friend who's quite brilliant, who has ADHD. You got airplanes on the runway. If all of them take off at once, nobody gets anywhere. You're going to have to launch the first plane. It doesn't mean that plane necessarily even has to arrive at its destination, but you must have it. It must reach velocity. It must be really on its way before you can launch the next plane. So I will say you've got to make a choice before you get in, what do you want? And then it becomes a matter of helping people make the distinction between what they want and how they feel, which is where I think the great premise of your show comes in terms of doing the hard thing.
Hey guys, a quick pause on the show. We have a wonderful, tremendous blessing to be in America for most of us who are in America, but for all of us who have access to technology, and if you do, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you do, we have this blessing and benefit to be able to sit at the feet of learned people and hear their experiences, their stories. That's what's happening with you listening to my guests. But you can do that to people like George Washington, Ulysses S. Grant, people throughout history, all the experiences they've had, and even people today like Elon Musk and Tim Ferriss and all those really smart people. And I want to give you that chance. So you go to audibletrial.com/thehardthingpodcast. You can get a free audiobook. And one I might recommend is called Tools for Titans by Tim Ferriss. Excellent book. So go to audibletrial.com/thehardthingpodcast, the Hard Thing Podcast. Get a free audiobook as well as a free 30-day trial starting today. Go get your audiobook. Start learning at the feet of intellectual, spiritual giants, people who are above average. I'm going to get back to the show. Yeah. Go ahead.
What I was saying about that was, you say you want to write that book, and you've gotten very clear that you have something to say, and you want to write it, but you find you just don't feel like it. And, and people will sometimes conflate feeling like doing something with wanting to do it. They are entirely different things. People may start to minimize the importance of what they want to do because they don't feel like it. And they start to buy into the idea that, well, if they don't feel like it, maybe it's not important. And so they don't create the meaning in the world that they're meant to. So that's, well, end of sentence, really.
Yeah.
What you feel is not what you want. It's probably resistance.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it in the terms of nutrition. All of us enjoy having, I love big bowls of ice cream, and I enjoy that in the moment, and I feel like eating ice cream.
Yeah.
But deep down, I want to feel good in my body. I want to feel capable of doing all the things that I want to do in life. And that requires that, sometimes, most times, I don't eat that bowl of ice cream. I'm not perfect, by the way.
No, of course. So. Yeah. But, I know. Yes, continue. Yes, the bowl of ice cream is a good analogy.
Yeah. I was going to ask, how did you get into, career coaching, and what led you to do what you're doing right now?
Well, as I mentioned, I am a theater artist. I started as an actor, and I came to New York City. It was very difficult. There were a lot of basic human tools I did not have that you really need to succeed in probably what is the most difficult profession there is.
Could you give some examples of those tools?
Of those tools, well, being able to separate yourself from your work, being able to be grounded in your own value as a human being so that you could weather rejection and not take it personally. Having a really clear view of, having a real clear view of myself. I mean, a casting director once said to me, you're terminally East Village. I just see you doing a lot of loft theater. And, I was crushed. I don't think she meant it nicely. But then again, if I had not given her that power to crush me, I could have seen it as marketing advice. Because when you think of the really interesting offbeat performers who, quote, made it because they're household names, like like I'm thinking of Bette Midler, she started singing in bathhouses, gay bathhouses. I would not have thought of that because I wanted to be Reese Witherspoon or whatever. I mean, which is, of course, absurd. I mean, look at me. You have to be able to detach from yourself, I think, separate enough to see yourself clearly, and there's an egolessness to that. So that, going through the experience of not having what it takes, not in terms of talent, but in terms of resilience, caused me to move into an ashram for 2.5 years and just, we say, contemplate our navels. Well, yes, because I had to look inside. I had to figure out, who am I? Because I was so identified with my success as an actor that if that didn't happen, there was no life worth living. So that was a very important time for me. A time where nobody gave a shit what anybody there, nobody cared that I was an actor at this ashram. I learned some skills. I learned how to make a living. That's really where I learned to do what I had to do rather than what I felt like doing. Because it was a commune, it was, communal society. I worked in the kitchen. If we didn't work together, nobody ate. So coming out of the ashram a couple of years later, I had gained the knowledge that company is stronger than will. So I knew if I wanted to be a performer, I needed some support, and spontaneously started creating support systems around myself, using books like Wishcraft by Barbara Scher as a guide, and Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, which I worked through like 4 times. And I would facilitate these groups, not like a teacher or a leader. I would just be the timekeeper. I would ask the questions that were prescribed. What do you want? What's in the way? What can you do? And people started being successful. Even I did. I needed to make a living, and I yoga practice. I became a professional stand-up comic for 6 years. A friend of mine opened a bookstore on Lexington Avenue in New York City, which is no small thing, and she was a public school teacher. I was married by then, and my husband said, "You're good at this. You should start charging." And I also realized I enjoyed it. I didn't know what it was. I came to learn it was this thing called coaching. And I realized it brought together all of my strengths, all of my skills from being a writer and an actor are transferable to coaching, because you have to listen. You have to see a narrative. You have to help people see the narrative they are creating, and you have to help them rewrite it so that it's the life they want. It had it all. Coaching had it all. So I started studying formally, started professionally coaching in 2003, and that's what brought me here. I have since written plays and acted in things. I like to say I act by invitation. I'm not big. I don't go and hit the audition circuit very much. Once in a while, I'm invited to do something, and I do it, and it's great. I've had plays that have been highly acclaimed, and I'm very proud of those accomplishments. But one of the things I needed to learn to do in this life was make a living, was be a grown-up and make a grown-up living. And coaching was the way where coaching was made the most sense. It's what I could sustain. It uses all of me. I enjoy it. It's of service. All of the right stuff came together around it for me. And that's how I came to do it. Wow.
And on your website, it says you focus on coaching creatives and entrepreneurs. What made you pick that niche, if I can ask?
I think your clients define you, and certainly the people I knew and the people I originally was working with in these informal leaderless groups were entrepreneurs, were artists. I have been in corporate settings, and they're not good for me, and I'm not good for them. It would be great to make lots and lots of money as this high-powered executive coach, I love that. And, which is not to say I couldn't go in and be my funky self at some companies and make some money. And I've started doing sponsorships for lunch and learns, and, they do these health fairs at companies. It's not to say I can't go in, and not all my clients, it turns out, are artists and entrepreneurs. Business people have found their way to me, but what they have in common is a sense of themselves thinking differently. And ADHD and creativity are very similar brain wirings. So you coach, I think you start coaching who you know. You know, that's one thing. I think my first group was a group of mothers, entrepreneurial moms, freelance moms. Well, that's what I was. So that made sense. I could empathize with those problems. And eventually I realized even that was too large a niche. I wanted to get, I mean, yeah, I coach. My practice is equal men and women. I don't, at one point, for whatever reason, because of a lack of training, I couldn't coach men. It was weird, but now I coach everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What brings people together, though, under the umbrella of working with me is the focus is that of having so much to say and so much to do that they get all bollocksed up and can't get any of it out. It is a desire to create meaning and being overwhelmed by the enormity of that. That's what my clients, I would say, all have in common.
Pause on the conversation, guys, 1 second. So I recently started into boxing. I downloaded an app that's teaching me how to box, and I'm doing it every day so far. Probably not every day. I actually just started today, but it's very tiring. It's very exhausting. It's very fun, but it's exhausting. And in order to be tip-top shape and have my muscles look exactly how I want them, you need the supplements from One Mission Nutrition. They offer excellent supplements, and the best part is that all of the products you buy from One Mission Nutrition actually go towards helping make a strength box for a soldier overseas. So I'd like to invite you to get the muscles you're looking for, get the energy you need by getting the supplements from One Mission Nutrition. Go to allegiance.onemissionnutrition.com/The Hard Thing Podcast for a 10% discount on all the supplements you get there today. But in the meantime, I'm going to get back to today's show. So with a new client, let's say, what are the first things you do with them to help them start down their road?
Well, first of all, we do a consultation. So before they hire me, I get a sense of whether or not we're a fit by coaching them around something. The thing about coaching that's different than therapy is it is more of a partnership. It's not me fixing the person, right? Or bestowing them with my great interpretation of their problem,
Right.
So the process is coming to an agreement about what that person wants from the session in the moment, what they want to take away that day, and deciding how they know they've gotten there. For instance, sometimes people want to make a decision they can't make. So we will talk about that. I'll coach them around that. And if they have made the decision or are closer to making the decision, I can sense it's a fit. Then we talk about money and the structure of my practice and all of that. And once we start working together, I start big. And we go from big to we reverse engineer. I start by everything in your life, I believe, affects everything else. And we start with the vision of where they want to be in 6 months. And then we reverse engineer that to working towards that 6-month goal or goals. Sometimes it's several in different areas of life. Where do you need to be in 3 months? And then we reverse engineer that. And to, by April, by May, by June. And week to week, we set up what are the goals for the week. And the thing about having ADD or having any kind of focus issue is it's very hard to see past what is shiniest. the cliche shiny object syndrome. Whatever is shiniest, and very often it's your feelings what's shiniest. It's the rumination in your head that's shiniest. So getting people to develop tools to snap out of that so that they see how their actions now are going to build towards or not what it is they're creating for themselves in the future, what it is they've invested in through coaching. And by the way, that also is different than therapy. Coaches get paid in advance. We want to see skin in the game.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, and it's I think I've heard it say ontological rather than psychological. Ontological being having to do with systems and creating systems. It's all about creating systems so that you're developing environments emotionally, physically, in terms of your support, your community, that will inevitably result in what you want to do and where you want to go. So, there are differences. I'm more of a road buddy and a driving instructor than a car mechanic, which is more therapy. Therapy's, the car mechanic. And once the car is running fine, you may not know how to drive it. And that's usually what happens. People realize, I've done a lot of work on myself. My best clients have done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of work on myself. I just can't seem to get done what I want to get done. Okay, come on. I'm going to give you a driving lesson. So,
well,
yeah.
It sounds like kind of like we've been talking about, getting away from what you're feeling and more towards what you want, and kind of making that switch back and forth when you really need to. Now, on your website, it also said that, and we've talked about this, you specialize in career coaching specifically.
Yeah.
How is that different than just everyday coaching?
Well, the dirty little secret is that it's all life coaching. It's all life coaching. Come on. You got to focus, though. Again, it's about niche, I'm not a weight loss coach, but if that's an issue and it's stopping you from being happy enough to write your book, let's work on it. You know what I'm saying? It's all life coaching. But what gets people in the door to do the work is frustration around their career.
Interesting. So, specifically with career, what systems or processes, practices, what do you help institute in your clients' lives?
Okay. Well, we start out with what they think is stopping them. Maybe they have a real hard time tooting their own horn. Maybe they need to brag a little bit, right? They never got around to writing that resume. Okay, let's just get it. The perfectionism, right? If it's a writer, sometimes they have written the whole book, but it's sitting in their drawer because. And they have to engage with the marketplace. They have to find a publisher. Or more often than not, they haven't even written the book because they don't want, because if they write it, it might not be perfect. You have to desecrate the page, right? You have to make a mess. So I like to say that there are 4 primary emotions that screw people up when it comes to career. And it's actually the subject of the book I want to write this year. Those 4 emotions are shame, grandiosity, envy, and boredom. Those are the 4, when it comes to doing stuff, getting things done, career, right? Whether it's career, and that could be starting a not-for-profit, building a house, First of all, shame, the fraud factor. What if it sucks? That keeps people from stepping out and being visible. The flip side of that, I believe, is grandiosity, this idea that somehow you're different and you should be perfect out of the gate. And if anybody finds fault, then you shouldn't have done it in the first. That's very grandiose. That is grandiose. Nobody. I don't care. I mean, I had the privilege of working with Meryl Streep many, many years ago as an actor. And in rehearsal, she wasn't that, you know? I've seen all kinds of people who are well known not have great performances, you know? But somehow that flip coin, shame, grandiosity, I'm better off here up in the darkness of my mind than venturing out and, exposing this fragile, beautiful piece of porcelain to the world, right? And then envy, again, is that compare and despair syndrome. And I've heard other guests of yours, because I did listen to your most recent podcast, the idea
Thank
of,
you.
everybody has their A reel on Facebook, right? It's their A reel. We don't see the cuts on the editing floor, So that stops people. Envy. Well, that's my life she's living, so I may as well not. That's crazy shit.
Yeah.
First of all, the life that you are meant to live is going to look nothing like you imagine, because it's all made up, and how you perceive reality has nothing to do with objective reality, because frankly, there is no objective reality. Now we're getting a little metaphysical here. However, it's not, that's the thing. Whatever happens, you can spin it into something positive or something negative. It's just how you frame it. So I spend a lot of time working with clients on that. I think that's our stock and trade. Coaches help people reframe. We help you rewrite your story, because, as I like to say, your belief is simply an opinion that you have somehow mistaken for a fact. And it's very liberating to realize it's not a fact. It's just a story. And you get to change the story. You get to say it is absolutely perfect that I got rejected by that dance company, because now I get to really pinpoint what I need to do to strengthen my game in this area, or now I have time to start my own dance company, or, not to be Pollyanna, you're going to grieve. You're going to grieve. It never feels good to get rejected. However, I think there's an element of learning to trust life and trust that whatever comes at you, you're going to make some meaning in the world as a creator. And when I say a creator, I don't simply mean artist. To me, creativity is a synonym for resourcefulness. There's so much creativity going on right now in dealing with this pandemic, in getting people what they need, and people making masks out of whatever they have. That's creativity. Right?
It's funny that you say that, because the word, as far as I know, the word entrepreneur, it's a French word, and it like the word itself literally means to entre, like from inside, or inside, preneur, to take. So take from something from inside, and basically bring it out. Like you said, take that fragile, creation and expose it to the world, and offer it up for judgment. But also, like you said, offer some resourcefulness to the situations that surround us. And I think that's very challenging. So the four things you said were...
The fourth thing is boredom. I didn't get to the fourth thing. Right. I went off on some rant having to do with envy. Boredom. Boredom is the most pernicious, the most dangerous. Because what will happen is you'll start, and this started... to me, with several of the things I've written, I've done several one-woman shows, and sometimes I would get into rehearsal and I would be bored with myself, and I didn't feel like going through the material. It just felt flat, and you start to think it doesn't matter. You know, whenever you start anything, it's like you're shot out of a cannon and it's all this inspiration, something is new. But
Hmm.
then when you get into the repetition, any musician will tell you they have to practice whatever their scales, it gets boring. And when it gets boring, you start to think, maybe it doesn't matter. And the most meaningless thing you can do is quit, because then the world won't have it. The world won't have what it is you are in the midst of creating. That's giving into I don't feel like it instead of creating what you want. So boredom is very dangerous if you succumb to it. So those are the four: shame, grandiosity, envy, and boredom. Beware of
Yeah.
those four. There are ways to antidote those four emotions, and that's really what the work most often boils down to with clients.
Well, I agree with you that boredom, and I feel like boredom can also kind of piggyback on envy,
Mm-hmm.
because you start to compare yourself to other people and you see their results and you're still on, mile, 5 or 6 of a marathon, and you're
Yeah,
like, wow, so and so's already finished the marathon. And as you were talking about boredom, it made me think of marathons themselves. When you start and when you finish a marathon, there's a lot more people on the sidelines cheering you on than at mile 13 when you're in the middle. There's not as many people. Maybe there's a drink area or something like that, but you're basically running by yourself and you can get pretty
that's
bored, you
right.
know, you know.
That's right. That
So,
is absolutely right. And that's why people hire a coach. You need somebody running alongside you going, come on, you can do it. Yeah, nobody's cheering, but I'm here. I'm here with you. I'm here with you. Right.
yeah.
When you start to feel like if an artist rehearses a play, does it and nobody's there, does it exist? You need somebody who gives a shit besides you. You
Yeah.
need that external, not just accountability, but validation. Validation that what you are trying to do matters.
Yeah.
And that's really what the coach's job is, to hold the vision of the client, to hold the meaning the client is trying to make in the world, so that even when they lose sight of it, you're there going, here it is, right here. This is what you said you were going to do, and this is why you said you were going to do it, and I think it's fantastic. And that's enough sometimes, just to get someone to go through those quiet miles with no one along the sidelines cheering, you
Yeah.
know.
That's a very fascinating way of putting it, because in that sense, as the coach running that marathon with them,
Hmm.
you are you're running the same race, but it's honestly kind of a different race, because you have to not only run the race, go through all the hardships that they are, but do it in a way that they can trust you and rely on you. Um,
I would never presume to say I'm going through all the hardships they are. I'm not.
yeah,
They're doing the work. I'm doing the coaching.
yeah,
They're doing the work. But I am there feeling it with them. I am there, witnessing. I'm witnessing. We all need a witness. That movie about the bringing home the dead veteran. Was it Save?
saving Private
No,
Ryan.
no, no, no. Chance. Something about the chance. Kevin Bacon plays an army officer who's tasked with bringing home the body of a dead soldier, and it's about the journey of bringing that body back to his family. And
Wow.
it's a little morose, because we're not talking about being dead, but if nobody pays attention to that soldier, then his service is lost. And at one point, an old man says to Kevin Bacon's character, "You're his witness now. You're his witness." And that's what the coach is. I'm
Wow.
your witness. I see your pain. I see the poignancy and the despair and what you are sacrificing to make this happen. And I am pulling for you. I give a shit. But I can't feel for them. I can't feel that pain for them. right?
Yeah.
I can't feel that frustration for them, you know?
There are some roads that you do have to walk alone. I mean, in the idea that you are the one walking that road. So,
Yeah.
but Rati, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you for being willing to kind of somewhat spontaneously get this done. And before we close out, let me ask you a couple questions that I ask all my
Sure.
guests again.
Okay.
Based on our conversation today, to help our audience take action, what 1 to 3 action items would you recommend they do today or this week to improve their lives?
Okay. 1 to 3 action items they do to improve their lives. All right. Well, one would be to decide the night before what it is you're going to do tomorrow. Especially now where we all have to create our own structures. We can't leave the house. Really. The night before, decide on the 3 big things, not a big to-do list, just 3 things that you're going to get done the next day. The next piece of advice would be do the hardest one first. Because, Mark Twain used to talk about if your job is to eat a frog, eat it first thing in the morning. And if your job is to eat 2 frogs, eat the bigger one first. That's called eating the frog. I think there's a book by that title. If there's something you're a little scared to do it first. Because then you've won the day. Right. And the third thing I would say is you gotta have that gratitude sandwich. Because when you wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed and you're feeling scared to face the day, whatever, if you turn your mind to 3 to 5 things you're grateful for, you're going to start to wake up and feel better, because fear, despair, all the rest of it cannot coexist in the same emotional space as gratitude. If you're grateful, you can't feel all that other stuff, and it's motivating. And when you go to bed at night, you can call them wins or you could call them gratitudes. It's a good idea to say, what went right today? Catch yourself doing something right. What are 3 things that went right? What are 3 things I'm grateful for, however you want to see it? And I don't care if it's the way the light hits the wall. There's going to be something.
Wow. That is awesome. I love hearing the different action items my guests leave, because they're all like a thumbprint from the guest. And I think you leave a little bit of yourself in the show, and I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Rati, how can our audience reach out to you, see what you're up to, and support what you're doing?
Well, the easiest thing is to go to creativecallingcoaching.com. So that, you can write me through there. I think you can find my Facebook page, which is actually facebook.com/Creative Calling Coaching. And I am doing a live stream right now, 12 o'clock Eastern on Facebook. There may be a Zoom link posted on my Facebook page to join the conversation. And right now, I know sometimes we're experiencing a little connection overload right now, actually, with all these Zoom meetings. So I really want this to be not just careerism, just anything you need to talk about or ask me about, because this is a special time. It's an opportunity to get a little free coaching. All of us are giving what we can, If you come, whatever is really hard right now, just getting through this whole situation as a human being, come as you are to my live stream. Those are the 2 things. So you should be able to get to that second thing through my website, creativecallingcoaching.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. I will put those up in the show notes of this episode. But thanks so much, Rati, for being on here with me. I really appreciate your time, and hope you stay safe.
Oh, thank you. You too.
There it is, guys. Another episode of the Hard Thing Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the very end. I really appreciate you and your support. And I know times can be hard, but We're here to help you through the hard times and to do those hard things, the strategic hard things that are gonna move the needle for you and give you a better life. So reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram at The Hard Thing Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Never miss an episode. We have episodes coming out on Thursdays and Mondays, or Mondays and Thursdays, however you want to think about it. But know that you're not alone, and you got a community here that's pushing for you. Reach out to us, connect with us. In the meantime, we'll see you on Thursday, and keep doing hard things because you will overcome average.